April 26th. Throughout the last few days, we've seen David's obsession with God's purposes and his enthusiasm and tenacity for God's affections that were unmatched in his time. But today we're reminded that despite his many strengths, David was indeed human. Today we read of David's great moral failure. His adultery with Bathsheba, followed by the murder of her husband Uriah, and the resulting death of other soldiers that were collateral damage in David's effort to cover it up, was the great mistake of David's life. There are so many things we can learn from today's reading, far too many to mention here, but a few things stand out. We see God's graciousness and even his tenderness in Nathan's confrontation with David. God's immediate priority was for David to understand the profound nature of what he had done, and the parable helped David immediately internalize that he was indeed the guilty man in the parable. We see that David's immediate confession and remorse is the appropriate and frankly the expected response from the man who had such intimacy with God. David's plea for forgiveness for this very sin in Psalm 51 is known throughout the ages as the model prayer for forgiveness. It is one of the great passages in all of Scripture. His response is not just, "Oops, shouldn't have done that, forgive me." It's a plea, "I am wrong, I am guilty, I have sinned against you, O God. Create in me a clean heart that I might not ever do anything like that again." We also see that really anyone, that all of us are capable of unspeakable acts. We see that all of us need humility and accountability. We see that we all need God's tender grace and forgiveness. And we see the model of how to accept God's forgiveness, God's correction, how to forgive yourself, embrace God's mercy, and then get up and in faith walk out your destiny, even in the full understanding of how disqualified you feel. David did so many things well. He even repented well. His response to God's confrontation is a call throughout the ages for all of us, that even in the midst of our greatest shame, God asks that we allow his forgiveness to wash over us. He asks that we forgive ourselves and continue on with his purposes for our lives. Here's today's application. Have you been able to forgive yourself for your greatest mistakes, for that horrible thing that haunts you? Did you know that when you ask for God's mercy, he chooses not to remember your sin? Did you know that he doesn't just brush your sin aside, but that he has placed your sin upon Jesus, who paid the debt in full with his life? The truth is that you can forgive yourself because God has already forgiven you. Meditate on that profoundly powerful truth today. Now here's today's prayer.